Hi, my name is Ryan, and in this video let's create this simple navigation overlay using HTML, CSS and a little bit of JavaScript. Here in my HTML file I've added a span tag with the class of open, and I've used an HTML entity for the hamburger menu icon. And just below the span tag we also have a paragraph tag, and for now that is all we need for the HTML. Now let's go to a CSS file. Here I've given the body a background color of 333. We'll be using the font family of Helvetica, and here I've centered the paragraph vertically and horizontally on the page. Now let's style the hamburger menu icon, so we'll select the class of open and we'll set its position to absolute. We'll position it at distance of 10 pixel from the right. We'll increase the font size to 2 EM and we'll change the color to white, and finally we'll use the cursor of pointer. Now let's add the marker for the overlay. So I'll go to my HTML file, and just below the paragraph tag I'll be adding a div with the class of overlay, and this overlay will contain a close button. For that we'll be using a span tag and we'll give it a class of close, and inside here we'll be adding an HTML entity for the close button, which is going to be a symbol of X, and below this we'll be adding the UL tag for the menu items, and this UL tag will contain a few anchors, and all of these are going to lead to nowhere, so I'll put an hash. The first one will be home, second can be about, third can be services, and the fourth can be contact. Now let's start styling the overlay. So I'll go to my CSS file, and just below here I'll be targeting the class of overlay. I'll give it a position of absolute, and I'll position it at 0 from the top, 0 from the right, 0 from the bottom, and 0 from the left. Let me make some space at the bottom. By doing this we will cover the entire space on the page. So now let's give it a background. We'll give it a gradient background, so we'll say linear gradient, which starts with the color 4FACFE and ends with 00F2FE. We'll also add an opacity so that by default we don't see it. So the opacity is going to be 0, and we'll also set the visibility to hidden. So by default the overlay is not going to be visible. However, for now let's comment out these two properties so that we can see the contents inside the overlay and style them. Later we'll add back these properties. So now let's select the class of close. We'll give it a position of absolute. We'll position it in the right, a distance of 10 pixel, and let's increase the font size to 3 EM. We'll give it a color of white, and we'll choose a cursor of pointer. Let me make some space at the bottom. The next thing we need to do is style the UL. So I'll set the height of the UL to 100 VH. We'll set display to flex, and we'll say justify content to center, so that the anchors are in the center horizontally, and for the vertical centering we'll say align items center. And finally we want these anchors to be placed one below the other, so we'll say flex direction column. Now let's style the anchors within the UL. We'll set the display to block. We'll set the text decoration to none. We'll give it a margin at the bottom of 20 pixels. We'll increase the font size to 3 EM. Next, we'll set the text transform to uppercase. We'll give it a color of white, and finally we'll set the cursor to pointer. For these anchors, we'll also give a hover state. So I'll say UL space A colon hover, and we'll say transform. We'll scale it up by 1.2. So let's check it, and here we have it. And finally, let's add in some transition. So I'll come up here and I'll say transition transform 0.5 seconds. Now let's check it, and there we have the hover effect. As I said earlier, by default the overlay will not be visible. So let's go up here and let's remove these comments, and now the overlay is not visible. However, we need to create a class which will be added to the overlay when somebody clicks on this hamburger menu icon, and so the overlay will be visible. So let's create that class. I'll create a class with the name of visible, and I'll set the opacity to 1, and I'll set the visibility to visible. Now this class will be added to the overlay using JavaScript. So let's go to our script.js file, and the first thing we need to do is we need to select the class of open. Let me maximize my code editor. I'll say document dot query selector, and I'll select the class of open, and I'll add an event listener of click, and we'll run a function. Inside this function we need to select the class of overlay, so let's do that. I'll say document query selector overlay, and we need to add a class which is the class of visible. So I'll say class list add visible. Now let's check it in the browser if it works, and it does. Now we need to select the class of close, which is this close button right here, and when somebody clicks on it we want the overlay to disappear again. So let's do that. So in my JS file I'll say document dot query selector close, and I'll add an event listener click, and again we'll run a function. Now we need to again select the class of overlay, and this time we need to remove the class. So I'll say class list remove visible. So now let's see if this works. I click on the hamburger menu, the overlay is visible. When I click on the X, the overlay is gone, and that is how it works. However, we have added a lot of repetitions in our JavaScript, so let's work on reducing the repetitions. So I'll come up here and I'll add a variable, and I'll name it open, and I'll copy this and I'll paste it here, and I'll create another variable. This time I'll name it overlay, and I'll say document query selector overlay, and finally we'll create another variable with the name close, and this time we'll copy this part right here. Now this simply becomes open, this becomes overlay, this becomes close, and this becomes overlay again. Now let's check if this works. I click on the hamburger menu, the overlay is visible, and I click on it again and I click on the close button. Now it's gone. And that is how you create a simple overlay using HTML, CSS and a little bit of JavaScript. And hope you liked the video. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, bye bye.